Hey, hit the bell icon after subscribing to get notifications. New content uploads every Wednesday. Enjoy the video. Rainbow Six Siege is now in the second year of DLC, and I can't help but notice that the game doesn't feel the same. And I don't mean because they added in alpha packs or changed hitboxes or anything of that nature. I mean because they're changing the two core elements that made Siege feel like Siege: the operators and the maps. And by saying that, that doesn't mean that I no longer enjoy the game. I still play it regularly. It just means I don't enjoy it as much now as I did in the past. I created a survey and asked Rainbow Six players to select their favorite and least favorite maps in the game, and to no surprise, House and Plane came in as the two most favorite, but the DLC maps were the ones voted highest in the dislike section, especially Favela. So why don't Rainbow Six players like the DLC maps compared to the base maps in the game? After going through all the maps in spectator mode, I realized the base maps in the game tend to follow a similar formula, a set list of features that the DLC maps tend to deviate from, and as a result, players don't find them as enjoyable. So, what's the formula that makes up the base maps that the DLC maps don't follow? Well, the base maps, in terms of size, they range from small to medium, a combination of rooms, open areas, and tight hallways, along with multiple floor hatches that can take you from the top of the map straight down to the bottom, and connected rooms. When I say connected rooms, what I mean is instead of pushing the objective room through entry points like a window or doorway, you can get to that room by going through a series of other rooms. For example, on the map border, you can get to the workshop downstairs by breaching the wall through the tellers, entering the bathroom, and then breaching the bathroom wall. Or you could come from the other side of the workshop from the front, hitting that window, and then hitting that second wall. And the last but most important feature that the base maps have is that they're simple. The layout is simple and easy to remember. Now when it comes to the DLC maps, my first theory was that the maps were made evolving around the operators released with them and their abilities. For example, on Yacht, there are a lot of windows and staircases, which would be good places for Frost to put down her traps, and a lot of destructible walls, which would be good for Buck to put holes in to expose defenders hiding in those rooms. On the map border, the ceiling is extremely high, which would be a good place for Valkyrie to hide her cameras so attackers can't spot them that easily, and there are windows around the map that would only really make sense looking through if you have something to protect your face, such as Blackbeard. And that theory is the only reason I could come up with as to why the maps changed so drastically. The first two DLC maps, Yacht and Border, still follow the map formula, however they just changed two things: the size and the complexity. In fact, I like to think of Yacht and Border as bigger versions of Plane and House. Yacht, just like Plane, has a linear shape to it, however it just has an extra floor, so instead of 3 we have 4 floors, but it still keeps that close quarters feel to it with long and narrow hallways and small rooms that can be breached from either side. So taking a look at the map Favela, I can see why so many people hate it, myself included. This map takes open areas and hallways out of the mix and is comprised of just rooms, which makes it extremely complex, and also the size. This is 2 areas connected by joining rooms. So by being made up of just all rooms, this stage is constant close quarters. You have no breathing room. From the time you step into this building, you have to know where you're going and what your plan of attack is. Also, by being made up of just rooms, apart from being hard to attack, this is even harder to defend because there are so many entry points and places to defend. Now on the map Skyscraper, we see the same structure. 2 areas connected by joining hallways, both upstairs and downstairs. However, it's bigger than Favela and is just as complex. Favela was complex because it did too much of one thing, which is just having rooms. Skyscraper is complex because it does too much of everything. On the left side of the building, we have connecting rooms and open areas, but when it comes to the right side of the building, they actually isolate the rooms between hallways, making you prone to being killed if you choose to breach from the hallway. Another thing that's so confusing about this map is the amount of routes you can take to get from one side of the building to the other. Now that may not sound like a bad thing, but when compared to the map Canal, it's very simple. There are 3 routes you can take: ground floor, through the bridge, or above the bridge. So I think the reason people don't like this map is because the layout is too complex, because it has too much going on. For the sake of saving time, I'm not going to talk about Coastline because that was not voted among the highest disliked. Also, personally, I don't think the map is that bad. It's not that great, but it's not as bad as the other two. Now, when it comes to the operators, what I liked about Siege is that everyone's abilities could be countered by someone else's abilities on the other side. Here's a simple scenario. Sledge is good at destroying the environment, so to get around that you reinforce a wall. However, Thermite can get through reinforced walls, so to stop that you bring a mute. Rolling one of Thatcher's EMP grenades underneath a door or through a vent can take out the mute jammer, and you can stop that by using one of Jaeger's ADS devices. By using Twitch's drone and going under the door or through a vent, you can take out Jaeger's ADS device, and you can stop that from happening altogether by using barbed wire and one of Bandit's electrical batteries, and it can go on and on. So that was an example of using operators' abilities who directly counter each other, and then there are ways to indirectly counter them. For example, with the shield operators Montaigne and Blitz, you have to resort to using Capcan traps, frost traps, or trapping them with smokes gas grenades. But the problem I have is with operators who you can't counter with any abilities. So instead you have to use your drone, find them, track them down, and kill them. And to me that kind of takes away from the feeling of Siege. That was part of the appeal to me, abilities and gadgets. So I have a problem with the operators Jackal, Glaz, Kuvira, and Capitão, 3 of which I see constantly. Capitão has no counter. I would have thought the only suitable counter would have been Jaeger, but after testing, Jaeger's ADS devices does not stop his arrow, so Capitão can just run around shooting his asphyxiating firebolts as much as he pleases. Secondly, Glaz. Now I had no problem with Glaz shooting through the plane window, or being the only one to shoot through castle doors. Even when they ramped up the rate of fire on his DMR, I didn't mind, because in my opinion it did shoot too slow. However, what I do mind is that they gave him an easy mode with his new thermal vision. Walking near mute jammer does not affect it. Walking through bandits barbed wire does not affect it. It's just on all the time from the start of the match till the match ends. It doesn't even run on a timer or run out of battery. I would say that needs adjusting. If it can't be countered by anyone on the other side, then I would say it needs to have some drawbacks. Next up is Kuvira, the one who I hate most out of all. Sometimes the reason behind nerfs for certain operators is that their pick rate was too high. So I can't understand why Kuvira has not seen as much nerfs as Blackbeard has, because I see her every match. I think she's the most OP person in the game at this point, not just because of her ability, but because of the lack of a way to counter it. You can't directly or indirectly counter her ability, you just have to track her down and kill her. But speaking of tracking down, Jackal is no better. Sure, if you walk next to a mute jammer, the headgear gets all fuzzy. On top of that, I would say Jackal is the only person who is able to counter Kuvira. But however, once again, her abilities give her a loophole into Jackal's tracking. If she uses Silent Step, he can no longer track her footprint. I don't see the point of it. Sure, the ping still remains, but for someone who can down you with 3 shots from her pistol, I would like to know exactly where she is by looking at her footprints. So this is what I mean by the game is changing and doesn't quite feel the same. Maps are getting more complicated and operators can no longer be directly or indirectly countered by other people's abilities, and as a result you just have to end up tracking them and killing them. The Hong Kong DLC is supposed to release next month, hopefully, so I hope the team working on Siege keep these things in mind, the map layout and keeping it simple, and having a way to counter the new operators' abilities when they release. Now I'm not saying that they can't switch stuff up and try new things. I'm just saying when you stray too far away from what worked in the past, well, that's when you run into problems.